She said, "I'm going out with the girls tonight. Don't wait up." I replied, "Okay, no big deal." Then I watched her grab her purse, kiss my cheek with those perfectly glossy lips, and walk out into the rain like she was heading to some innocent book club meeting. What she didn't know was that I'd already planted a GPS tracker in her car 3 days ago, and I knew exactly where she was going. While she was out there playing her little games, I had swapped her favorite perfume with a cologne sample I'd lifted from her lover's gym bag. 24 hours later, she walked back into our house, full of smiles and fake stories about martinis with the ladies, but when she got close enough to kiss me goodnight, I watched her freeze as she caught that familiar scent on herself. She had no idea what I had planned next. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Jack Grady, and I'm what you might call a professional problem solver. Not the kind that wears expensive suits and charges by the hour like my wife Melissa does at her fancy downtown law firm. I'm the kind that gets his hands dirty fixing marine engines, welding hull breaches, and keeping boats from sinking in the harbor of this God-forsaken coastal city that looks like God took a bite out of New England and spat it back out half-chewed. The rain was coming down in sheets that October night, drumming against the windows of our craftsman house like angry fingers. I was in the garage, supposedly working on the carburetor of my old Chevy, but really I was thinking about that GPS dot I'd been watching on my phone for the past 3 hours. Melissa's car had been parked at the Seaside Motor Lodge for exactly 2 hours and 17 minutes. The same cheap motel where she'd been meeting Brent Pomeroy, her law firm partner, every Tuesday and Thursday for the past month. Mrs. Larkin from next door was probably watching me through her kitchen window, wondering why I was tinkering with engine parts at 11 p.m. in the rain. The old busybody had been our neighbor for 8 years, and she knew everyone's business better than the local newspaper. Her porch light kept flickering like a dying firefly, casting weird shadows across my driveway. I'd found out about the affair 3 weeks ago when Melissa left her gym bag open on the kitchen counter. Right there, nestled between her yoga mat and protein bars, was a second cell phone I'd never seen before. The kind of cheap burner phone you buy at gas stations when you're planning something you don't want traced back to you. The text messages on that phone read like a trashy romance novel, full of hearts and promises and detailed descriptions of what they plan to do to each other. "Can't wait to feel you inside me again," one message read. "Bring that thing you did with your tongue last time," said another. Real classy stuff from my wife, the respected attorney who lectured me about maintaining our professional image in the community. But the message that really got to me was the one where she called me that pathetic grease monkey and told Brent how she was counting the days until the divorce papers are signed and I can finally be with a real man. That's when I decided to stop being the pathetic grease monkey and start being something else entirely. The first phase of my plan was simple: make them sweat. While Melissa was at the motel playing hide the briefcase with her partner, I drove over to Brent's neighborhood in the hills overlooking the harbor. His silver Mercedes was parked in the motel lot like a beacon of adultery, so I knew I had time. Brent lived in one of those flashy condos with a doorman and everything, the kind of place that screams, "I make more money than you, and I want everyone to know it." But money can't buy common sense, and Brent had left his car unlocked in the motel parking lot. It took me exactly 4 minutes to pop the hood, remove the distributor cap, and let the air out of all 4 tires. Then I left a little note under his windshield wiper. "Hope it was worth it. See you soon, lover boy. A concerned citizen." I was back in my garage before midnight, humming while I cleaned my tools. Melissa came home 20 minutes later, her hair slightly messed up, and her lipstick nowhere to be found. She gave me that fake smile and started telling me about her evening with the girls at some wine bar downtown. "How was your night, honey?" she asked, hanging up her coat. Oh, just working on the car, I said, wiping grease off my hands with a rag. Fixed a real interesting problem with the engine. Amazing what you can accomplish when you know where all the important parts are. She nodded and headed upstairs, completely missing the double meaning. That was Melissa for you. Brilliant in the courtroom, dumb as a post when it came to reading people. The next morning I was having my coffee and reading the sports section when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off, or you'll regret it. BP. I had to laugh. Brent Pomeroy, the big-shot lawyer, was trying to intimidate me through text messages. This was going to be even more fun than I'd thought. The thing about small coastal cities is that everyone knows everyone else's business, and secrets spread faster than oil spills. By Thursday morning, half the town had heard about some mysterious car trouble at the Seaside Motor Lodge, and the other half was wondering why Brent Pomeroy had to call a tow truck at midnight on a Tuesday. I got the full story from Red McKenzie, the bartender at Donovan's Pub, our local dive bar, where the beer is cheap and the gossip is free. Red had been my friend since high school, back when we were both stupid enough to think we'd leave this town and make something of ourselves somewhere else. 22 years later, we were both still here, him pouring drinks and me fixing boats. So Brent comes in here yesterday afternoon, Red told me while polishing a glass that had seen better decades. Looking all flustered and angry, ordering whiskey like it was water. Keeps checking his phone and muttering about amateur hour pranks and teaching people lessons. Sounds like someone's having a rough week, I said, nursing my beer and trying to look innocent. Gets better, Red continued. He starts running his mouth about how he's going to make some blue-collar loser pay for messing with his property. Real tough guy talk, Then his phone rings, and suddenly he's all sweet and lovey-dovey, talking to someone about meeting up later. Called her baby and gorgeous about 15 times. I felt my jaw clench. The idea of Brent calling my wife pet names made me want to wrap my hands around his throat and squeeze until his eyes popped out like champagne corks. But I kept my cool. Getting angry wasn't going to help me win this war. Anyway, Red said, he leaves a big tip and tells me he's got important business to handle. Probably went home to practice his tough guy speech in the mirror. That night, I decided to up the stakes. Melissa was working late at the office, or at least that's what she told me. I knew better. Thursday was one of their regular motel nights, which gave me plenty of time to pay a visit to Brent's fancy condo building. The doorman was some college kid who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I walked up to him with a clipboard and a confident smile. Maintenance inspection, I told him. Building management sent me to check the elevator cables. Safety issue. He barely looked up from his phone. Yeah, whatever. Elevator's over there. Getting into Brent's apartment was trickier, but not impossible. The lock was one of those electronic keypads that people think are so secure. What they don't realize is that most people use obvious combinations, birthdays, addresses, phone numbers. It took me 6 tries to figure out that Brent had used his law school graduation year, 1998. His apartment was exactly what I'd expected, all black leather and chrome, with abstract paintings that probably cost more than I made in a month. But what caught my eye was the vintage guitar hanging on the wall in a glass case. A 1959 Gibson Les Paul that had to be worth at least $20,000. The little placard underneath said, "Purchased at auction, 2019. My pride and joy." I carefully removed the guitar from its case and carried it down to the lobby. Then I used the building's elevator cables, the same ones I'd told the doorman I was there to inspect, to string it up between floors with a note attached. Played out. Time for a new tune. Your biggest fan. The next morning I got another text from BP. You have no idea who you're messing with. This ends now, or I make it end. I texted back, looking forward to our next conversation. P.S. How's the music business? 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I knew who it was. Listen, you piece of garbage. Brent's voice was shaking with rage. I don't know what sick game you think you're playing, but it's over. I've got connections in this town, and I can make your life very difficult. Funny, I said. I was just thinking the same thing about you. By the way, does your wife know about your Tuesday and Thursday music lessons? The line went quiet for a long moment. Then, what do you want? I want you to stop screwing my wife in cheap motels and thinking you're going to ride off into the sunset with her. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. And I want you to know that this is just the beginning. I hung up before he could respond. Phase 2 was about to begin. Detective Maria Martinez showed up at my house on Friday afternoon, just as I was getting home from work. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and the kind of no-nonsense attitude that told me she'd dealt with plenty of guys like me before. "Mr. Grady," she said, flashing her badge, "I'd like to ask you a few questions about some recent incidents involving Brent Pomeroy." I invited her in, offered her coffee, and played the confused, innocent husband routine. "Brent Pomeroy? I think my wife works with him. Has something happened?" "Someone's been harassing Mr. Pomeroy," she said, pulling out a notebook. "Vandalizing his property, leaving threatening notes, breaking into his apartment building. He seems to think you might know something about it." "I can't imagine why he'd think that," I said. "I barely know the man. We've maybe exchanged 10 words at office parties." Martinez studied my face like she was reading a map. "Where were you Tuesday night around 11 p.m.? "Right here, working on my car in the garage. My neighbor, Mrs. Larkin, can probably confirm that. She's always watching what goes on in the neighborhood." "And Wednesday evening?" "Donovan's pub until about 9, then home. The bartender, Red Mackenzie, can vouch for that." She wrote everything down, asked a few more questions, then handed me her card. "Mr. Grady, if you know anything about what's been happening to Mr. Pomeroy, now would be a good time to tell me. These kinds of situations have a way of escalating, and nobody wants that." After she left, I sat in my kitchen and thought about what she'd said. Martinez was right about escalation. Things were definitely about to get more intense, but not in the way she was expecting. That evening, Melissa came home early, which was unusual. She seemed nervous, distracted, checking her phone every few minutes like she was expecting bad news. "Everything okay at work?" I asked. "Fine," she said quickly. "Just some office drama. You know how it is." I knew exactly how it was. Brent had probably told her about his car trouble and the guitar incident, maybe even mentioned that he suspected me. What he hadn't told her was about the little listening device I'd planted in her office earlier that week. Getting into the law firm had been easier than breaking into Brent's apartment. I'd simply waited until the cleaning crew arrived, then walked in with them carrying a toolbox and wearing coveralls. Everyone assumes that if you look like you belong somewhere, you probably do. The device was smaller than a matchbox, with a battery life of about 2 weeks. I'd stuck it under Melissa's desk, where she'd never think to look. For the past 3 days, I'd been listening to her phone calls, her meetings, and most importantly, her private conversations with Brent. That's how I knew they were planning to meet at a different location, a cabin by the lake that belonged to one of Melissa's clients. And that's how I knew they were getting desperate enough to consider taking care of the Jack problem permanently. But what I found most interesting was the third voice I'd been hearing in some of those recordings. Tasha Green, Melissa's best friend and another lawyer at the firm, had been spending a lot of time in my wife's office lately, and the things she was saying didn't sound like the supportive friend routine she put on when I was around. "You need to be more careful," I'd heard Tasha tell Melissa. "Jack's not as stupid as you think he is. I should know. I used to work for him." That stopped me cold. Tasha used to work for me? I'd never hired any lawyers, and I sure as hell didn't remember anyone named Tasha Green. But then I started thinking about the woman who'd worked in my office 5 years ago, handling the books and scheduling. Teresa Gonzalez, who I'd fired for stealing money from client payments. Teresa, who'd sworn she'd make me pay for ruining her career and destroying her reputation. Teresa Gonzalez. Tasha Green. Different name, different hair color, but the same vindictive eyes and the same nasty smile. Suddenly, everything made sense. The affair, the timing, the way Melissa had started pulling away from me exactly 6 months ago, right around the time Tasha had started working at the law firm. This wasn't just about my wife falling for another man. This was about revenge, carefully planned and expertly executed. But two could play that game. Saturday morning, I called in a favor from my old friend Coach Ray at Murphy's boxing gym. Ray had been teaching guys like me how to fight for 30 years, and he understood the difference between throwing punches and winning wars. "I need to borrow your gym for a private meeting tomorrow night," I told him. Nothing violent, just a conversation between adults. "This about that wife of yours and her fancy lawyer boyfriend?" Ray asked. In a town this size, secrets didn't stay secret for long. "Among other things. You be careful, Jack. Smart beats strong every time, but stupid can ruin everything." "Don't worry, Coach. I've got this all figured out." Sunday evening, I sent 3 text messages from 3 different burner phones I'd bought at 3 different stores. The first went to Melissa. "Meet me at Murphy's gym, 8 p.m. Come alone. We need to talk. Jack." The second went to Brent. "Jack knows everything. He's planning something at Murphy's gym tonight at 8. You need to be there to protect me. M." The third went to Tasha. "Emergency meeting. Murphy's gym, 8 p.m. Jack's on to us and Melissa's about to crack. B." Then I sat back and waited for the show to begin. Murphy's boxing gym at night was like a cathedral of violence, all shadows and echoes, with the ghost smell of sweat and leather hanging in the air. I got there early, around 7:30, and set up my phone to record everything. The acoustics in the old building were perfect. Every word would be crystal clear. Melissa arrived first, looking nervous and checking over her shoulder like she expected to be followed. She was dressed for battle in her best power suit, the navy blue one she wore to important court cases. Her heels clicked on the concrete floor like a countdown timer. "Jack?" she called out. "Are you here?" I stepped out of the shadows near the heavy bags. "Hello, sweetheart. Thanks for coming." "What's this about?" she demanded. "And why did we have to meet here?" "I thought it was appropriate," I said. "This is where guys like me learn how to take a beating and keep fighting. Seemed like the right place for this conversation." Before she could respond, the gym door opened and Brent walked in. He was trying to look confident, but I could see the tension in his shoulders and the way his eyes kept darting around the room. "What the hell is he doing here?" Melissa asked. "I got your text," Brent said to her. "You said Jack was planning something." "I didn't send you any text," Melissa replied. That's when Tasha Green made her entrance, and the look on her face when she saw all 3 of us together was worth the price of admission. "Well, well," I said. "The gang's all here. Teresa Gonzalez, right? Or do you prefer Tasha these days?" The color drained from her face. Melissa looked confused, but Brent was starting to put the pieces together. "I don't know what you're talking about," Tasha said, but her voice was shaking. 5 years ago, you worked for my marine repair business. You stole $12,000 from client payments over a 6-month period. I caught you, fired you, and reported you to the police. You swore you'd get revenge." "Jack, what are you saying?" Melissa asked. "I'm saying your best friend isn't your friend at all. She's been playing all of us from the beginning. Tell me, Tasha, was seducing my wife into an affair with her colleague part of the original plan, or just a happy coincidence?" Tasha's mask finally slipped, and the real Teresa Gonzalez emerged, cold, calculating, and filled with 5 years' worth of hatred. "You destroyed my life," she snarled. "I couldn't get another job in this town because of you. I had to leave, change my name, start over, but I never forgot what you did to me." "So you came back for revenge," I said. "Got a job at Melissa's firm, became her friend, and then what? Convinced her that her husband was holding her back, that she deserved better? It wasn't hard." Tasha said. She was already unhappy. All I had to do was point out how much more successful Brent was, how much more he could offer her. The affair was her idea. I just encouraged it. Melissa was staring at her best friend like she'd never seen her before. You manipulated me. You made me think. I made you see the truth, Tasha snapped. You are married to a loser who fixes boats for a living. Brent is everything Jack isn't. Successful, wealthy, sophisticated. I just helped you realize what you really wanted. And what did you get out of it? Brent asked. He was starting to look sick. I got to watch Jack's world fall apart piece by piece, Tasha said. His wife, his marriage, his reputation in this pathetic little town. I wanted him to lose everything, just like I did. There's just one problem with your plan, I said, pulling out my phone. I've been recording everything that's happened in this room for the past 15 minutes, including your confession to manipulating my wife into an affair as part of an elaborate revenge scheme. The silence that followed was deafening. You can't use that, Brent said. We didn't consent to being recorded. Actually, I can. This is a one-party consent state, and I'm one of the parties. But don't worry, I'm not planning to take this to court. I've got something much better in mind. I walked over to the gym's sound system and plugged in my phone. Suddenly, the entire gym was filled with the sound of Tasha's voice confessing to her manipulation, followed by recordings I'd made from the listening device in Melissa's office, conversations about the affair, about their plans to leave me, about how they thought I was too stupid to figure out what was happening. The whole town is going to hear this, I said. Mrs. Larkin and her gossip network, everyone at Donovan's pub, all your colleagues at the law firm. By tomorrow morning, everyone will know exactly what kind of people you really are. Melissa started crying. Brent looked like he wanted to punch something, and Tasha, Teresa, looked like she wanted to kill me with her bare hands. You think you've won? She said. You think this changes anything? Your marriage is still over. Your wife still chose him over you. You're right, I said. My marriage is over, but it's not ending the way you planned. The annual Lighthouse Festival was the biggest event of the year in our little coastal city. Every October, the whole town gathered at Harbor Park for food trucks, local bands, and speeches from various dignitaries. It was the kind of wholesome community event where everyone showed up to see and be seen, which made it the perfect venue for my grand finale. I'd spent the week since the gym confrontation making copies of my recordings and preparing my presentation. Melissa had moved out of the house, staying at some hotel downtown while she figured things out. Brent had been avoiding his usual haunts, probably hoping the whole thing would blow over, and Tasha had called in sick to work every day, though I knew she was still in town because Mrs. Larkin had seen her car parked behind the old Sears building. The festival was in full swing when I arrived Saturday evening. The smell of fried dough and barbecue filled the air, and a local rock band was playing covers of 80s hits on the main stage. I spotted Melissa near the wine tent, surrounded by her remaining friends and trying to pretend everything was normal. Brent was by the seafood stand, checking his phone obsessively. Tasha was nowhere to be seen, but I knew she'd show up eventually. She wouldn't be able to resist watching what she thought would be my final humiliation. At exactly 8 o'clock, I walked up to the stage where Mayor Davidson was preparing to give his closing remarks. The band had just finished their set, and the crowd was in a good mood, relaxed and ready to listen. "Excuse me, Mayor," I said, stepping up to the microphone. "I'd like to say a few words to the community, if that's okay." Mayor Davidson looked confused, but he stepped aside. The crowd quieted down, probably expecting some boring speech about harbor maintenance or boat safety. "Good evening, everyone," I began. "My name is Jack Grady, and most of you know me as the guy who fixes your boats when they break down. Tonight, I want to tell you a story about betrayal, revenge, and the importance of knowing who your real friends are." I could see Melissa pushing through the crowd, her face pale with panic. Brent was right behind her, and even Tasha had emerged from wherever she'd been hiding. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that my wife of 12 years was having an affair with her colleague, Brent Pomeroy. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's between them, right? Private business. But it turns out this affair was orchestrated by someone with a very specific agenda. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the sound system. I'd like you all to meet Teresa Gonzalez, who's been masquerading as Tasha Green for the past year. Teresa used to work for me until I caught her stealing money from my business. She swore she'd get revenge, and she spent 5 years planning it. I pressed play, and Tasha's voice filled the park. I got to watch Jack's world fall apart piece by piece. His wife, his marriage, his reputation in this pathetic little town. I wanted him to lose everything, just like I did. The crowd was dead silent. I could see phones coming out, people starting to record. This was going to be all over social media within minutes. But here's the thing about revenge, I continued. It's like a boomerang. It always comes back to hit you in the face. I played more recordings. Melissa and Brent talking about me like I was some kind of trained animal. Tasha coaching Melissa on how to manipulate me. All three of them laughing about how clueless I was. Melissa finally reached the stage. "Jack, stop this, please." "Why?" I asked. "Are you embarrassed? Ashamed of what people might think? Funny how that works, isn't it?" Brent tried to climb onto the stage, but several people in the crowd held him back. "You can't do this," he shouted. "This is harassment." "Actually," I said, "this is justice. See, while you three were busy plotting my downfall, I was busy gathering evidence, not just of the affair, but of some other interesting activities." I pulled out a folder full of documents. "Did you know that Brent here has been skimming money from client escrow accounts, or that Teresa has been using a false identity to practice law, which is a felony, or that my dear wife has been helping them both cover it up?" The crowd was getting restless now. I could hear people talking, see the looks of disgust and disappointment on their faces. These were people who'd known Melissa and me for years, who'd been to our barbecues and birthday parties. They felt betrayed too. "I've already sent copies of all this evidence to the State Bar Association, the District Attorney's Office, and the IRS, I announced. "I figure they'll be very interested in what you three have been up to." Tasha finally snapped. She rushed the stage, screaming obscenities and trying to grab my phone. But she was wearing high heels on wet grass, and she went down hard, taking out a table full of pumpkins in the process. The crowd actually laughed. "And now," I said, "I'd like to present my wife with a little gift." I pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to Melissa. "Divorce papers already filed. You'll also find copies of all the evidence I've gathered, along with a bill for half of everything we own together. The house, the boat, the savings account. It's all getting liquidated to pay for the lawyers I'm going to need to clean up this mess you've made." Melissa opened the envelope with shaking hands. Her face went from pale to green as she read the documents. "Oh, and one more thing," I said. "That GPS tracker I put in your car? It's been uploading your location data to a cloud server for the past month. Turns out you've been to a lot more places than just the Seaside Motor Lodge. The IRS is going to be very interested in those offshore bank meetings you've been having with Brent." The crowd was buzzing now, people talking excitedly and pointing at the three people who'd been exposed. I could see Mrs. Larkin near the front, taking notes like a war correspondent. "In conclusion," I said, stepping back up to the microphone, "I want to thank everyone for listening. And I want to remind you all of something important. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. These three people showed me exactly who they were, and I believed them. Now you know too." I unplugged my phone and walked off the stage. Behind me, I could hear Melissa crying, Brent shouting something about lawsuits, and Tasha being helped to her feet by paramedics who'd been called for her dramatic fall. As I walked through the crowd toward the parking lot, people patted me on the back and shook my hand. Red Mackenzie caught up with me near my truck. "Damn, Jack," he said. "That was something else. You really had this whole thing planned out, didn't you?" "From the moment I found that burner phone," I replied. They thought they were so smart, so careful. They forgot that the guy who fixes things for a living might know a thing or two about taking things apart. I drove home to my empty house, poured myself a beer, and sat on my front porch watching the harbor lights twinkle in the distance. My phone was buzzing constantly with calls and texts, but I ignored them all. Tomorrow, there would be lawyers and reporters and probably more visits from Detective Martinez. But tonight, I was content to sit in the silence and enjoy the calm after the storm. They'd thought they could bury me, destroy everything I'd built, and walk away laughing. They didn't realize that sometimes, when you try to bury someone, you're not putting them in a grave. You're planting them like a seed. And when they grow back up through the dirt, they don't come back as the same person you tried to kill. They come back as the storm,